Hello everyone, welcome to Samiksha Academy. Yesterday there happened an interesting debate in Supreme Court with respect to right to vote and freedom of voting. This happened with respect to a specific issue called as uncontested polls. Right. So in this context, let us try to understand the difference between what is right to vote, what is up to what extent we can have freedom of voting. Okay, so let us try to understand this. First, let us get to know what exactly these uncontested elections. What exactly uncontested elections means? I think in any given constituency, if there is only one candidate available to contest elections, in that case, that candidate will be automatically elected even without voting. This is what we call as uncontested elections. That means there is no other person to contest. In that case, they don't even need to go for voting. This, we have a section called as Section 53 of Representation of People's Act 1951. So according to this particular section, this particular uncontested elections, what exactly comes under uncontested election? It defined. Okay, till this point it is good. But now the question is, the petitioner here argued that, right, the candidate, there is only one candidate. However, there is also option called as nota. As the section is declaring the candidate unopposed without even going for the election, it is violating the option called as nota. The people are not even allowing, people doesn't even have the freedom to choose there, at least to go for the option called as nota. That is what the petitioner argued. Okay. To counter this, Government of India, Union Government, it came with another point that there is a difference between freedom of voting and right to vote. See here, what is the difference? What is the freedom of voting versus right to vote? Okay. There is a section within the same Representation of People's Act, that is Section 62 of Representation of People's Act 1951. As per this section, right to vote is a statutory vote. It is a statutory right. It's not a fundamental right. But people have fundamental right to voting. What is this confusion? Understood. Here we must understand one interesting judgment given by the Supreme Court under this particular thing, PUCL, People Union for Civil Liberties versus Union of India. Okay. So in this particular judgment, the Supreme Court mentioned that what is the difference between fundamental right to voting? I think you know this particular article, Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A. Under Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A, we have the right to election, freedom to vote, freedom to choose our candidates. It is a fundamental right. However, this fundamental right, this freedom is not absolute. What Supreme Court said here, suppose consider a scenario like this. Here we have the polling booth. Okay. Here we have the people. Okay. So, people have the freedom to vote under Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A. However, this freedom to vote will be available till they reach the polling booth. That means whom they have to vote, whether they have to vote it or not. Understood? Everything they have the freedom, right? They no need to fall under the trap of anything, be it money power, muscle power. However, once they approach the polling booth, here there comes some statutory limits. There you cannot come and say that I have absolute right to vote whenever I want I can vote. or in any given constant, if I want, I can vote. No. There exist some rules. Why? Because here elections has to happen in a procedural manner. Understood that? That's why the right to vote here differentiates from freedom of voting. When it comes to right to vote here, you will be having certain limitations. In this case also, even here also the same argument happened. Suppose there is a section within another section called as Section 79 of Representation of People's Act. It says no election left inconclusive. In a given constituency, only one candidate is contesting. In that case, elections has to happen. That means the result has to be declared. So there is a specific set of rules for that. Again, even if you go for Nota is not a candidate. If you go for Nota, there is no option for that. And that even in general case also, Nota votes will not be counted. Even in a given constituency, if the candidate gets less votes than Nota, still the candidate will be declared as winner. Understood that? That's why these rules we must follow. As we are following the rules, this right to vote comes under the statute. Here we have some restrictions with respect to voting, but not with respect to choosing the candidate to whom I have to choose, whether I have to go for voting or not. All you have the freedom over there. So this is the subtle difference we need to understand between what is freedom to vote and what is right to vote. Understood that? But the most interesting thing here, even UPSC also in one of the given is asked this question: right to vote is a constitutional right or statutory right? Because right to vote is a statutory right. Freedom to vote, freedom of voting, that means whether I have to vote, you have every right to discuss. But when it comes, once you reach the polling booth, there you will be you need to follow certain rules and regulations, especially under the Representation of People's Act 1951. Understood? This is what discussed yesterday. But the beauty here is that these kind of discussions must happen. Then only the democracy will thrive. Understood that? Thank you.